We're used to stories where the villain loses. The hero saves the day, the crowd cheers, and balance is restored. But what if that's not the whole truth? What if beneath the explosions and final battles, the villains still got exactly what they wanted? Sometimes the real victory isn't about who survives the fight, but about whose ideas survive afterward. When people think about Thanos in Avengers Infinity War and Endgame, the easy story is this: he lost. The Avengers reversed his snap, they brought everyone back, and Tony Stark sacrificed himself to finish Thanos once and for all. The good guys won. But if you look closer, you'll see something different. Thanos may have died, but the world he wanted still came to pass, just not in the way most people expected. His victory was not about staying alive, it was about changing the system, changing the way everyone thought, and in that sense, he actually succeeded. From the start, Thanos didn't care about ruling the universe. He wasn't like Loki, who wanted a throne, or Ultron, who wanted dominance. Thanos' goal was simple, even if terrifying: balance. He believed that the universe had limited resources, and that life was growing too fast. In his mind, the only solution was to cut it in half, quickly, fairly, and without bias. That's why the snap mattered so much. It wasn't about revenge or control, it was about forcing the entire universe to see what he saw, and when he destroyed the Infinity Stones afterward, it proved he wasn't after power. He wanted the result, not the weapon. However, here is the twist people miss. When the Avengers brought everyone back in Endgame, they didn't undo Thanos' victory, they only undid the surface damage, but the deeper impact stayed. Think about it, for 5 years the entire world lived in the shadow of the snap. Half of every family was gone, half of every workforce was gone, countries collapsed, and entire industries disappeared. But at the same time, something else happened. People adapted. In Endgame, Steve Rogers runs a support group where survivors talk about rebuilding, finding love, moving on. Black Widow organizes the Avengers like a global safety net. Even Tony Stark builds a life with Pepper and their daughter in a quiet lakeside home. The world was broken, but it was calmer, cleaner, and less crowded. People had space to breathe, and they built different lives because of it. That was Thanos' real victory. He forced change. When everyone came back in 2023, it wasn't like the world snapped back to normal. The return of billions of people created chaos. Suddenly, resources that had been stable for 5 years were stretched thin again. Housing, jobs, food, relationships, everything was disrupted. Marvel even shows this in The Falcon and the Winter Soldier, where governments struggle with the blip refugees. Entire movements form around the belief that life was better during the 5 years after the snap. To them, Thanos' world was the right one, and reversing it only brought back pain. This is where you realize, even in death, Thanos shaped the future. The universe could not forget him, or the truth he forced them to see. One of the darkest details is that Thanos himself predicted this. When the Avengers traveled back in time and younger Thanos saw their pain, he realized the truth: they could not live with their own failure. Thanos understood that no matter what the heroes did, they would always end up confirming his worldview. They could kill him, they could undo the snap, they could not erase the proof that his logic worked, at least for a while, and that's exactly what happened. A villain winning doesn't always mean they are alive at the end. Sometimes it means they changed the rules of the game so much that the world never goes back to what it was. In history and in stories, the most dangerous villains are the ones who leave behind ideas that outlive them. That's what makes Thanos different. He didn't want to be remembered as a ruler. He wanted his philosophy to survive, and in that sense, it did. Every Marvel project after Endgame still deals with his shadow, because sometimes victory isn't about being alive, it's about leaving behind a world that thinks differently, and in that way, Thanos truly was the villain who won. Meanwhile, there's another example, and this one is even darker because the cycle keeps repeating. Let's talk about President Snow from the Hunger Games. At first glance, Snow is the classic dictator who loses. He rules Panem with fear, using the Hunger Games to keep districts under control, and in the end, the rebels rise up. Katniss leads the fight, and Snow is captured. He dies, and his capital collapses. Now the villain is gone, but if you pay attention, Snow's vision doesn't actually disappear. His control over the system keeps going after his death, and that's what makes him one of those villains who technically won. Most people think the Hunger Games themselves were Snow's biggest tool. Of course, they were brutal. Forcing children to kill each other on live TV is about as cruel as it gets, but the games weren't just about killing, they were about control. Snow didn't just want to punish the districts for their past rebellion, he wanted to make sure they never united again. That's why he turned the games into a show, with parades, interviews, sponsors, and rewards. He made the whole country watch, celebrate, and even cheer. That's how Snow ruled, not just with fear, but with manipulation, and that skill doesn't end with him. When Katniss becomes the girl on fire, she inspires hope in the districts. A rebellion grows. Snow tries to crush it with violence, but here's the part many people miss. Snow already knew rebellions were dangerous, and he also knew they were predictable. Think about what he says to Katniss in Mockingjay. He admits that he isn't worried about her killing him. He's worried about what comes after. He tells her something powerful, that leaders often use hope the same way he used fear, and he was right. When the rebellion wins, Alma Coin takes his place, and what does she do? She immediately suggests holding a new Hunger Games, this time using the children of the capital. It's the same cycle, just dressed up differently. Snow dies, but his design of using violence as a tool for power, cycles of fear and revenge still lives on. This is where the villain who won the idea really hits. The capital falls, the tyrant is gone, and yet the new leader uses the same tactics. Coin talks about unity, about freedom from Snow's cruelty, but when she's in charge, she repeats his system. She wants to weaponize trauma instead of healing it. That's why Katniss makes her final choice. In the execution scene, she turns her arrow not on Snow, but on Coin, because by then, Katniss realizes that nothing has changed. Snow was right about one thing: the cycle of power keeps repeating. The names and faces are different, but the game is the same. And that's the darkest victory Snow could ever have hoped for. Even in defeat, he proved his worldview correct. If you step back, you see the bigger picture. Panem after Snow doesn't instantly transform into a free, happy nation. The scars of the games, the trauma of the districts, and the culture of violence remain. People are still divided, still suspicious, still caught in the same patterns Snow cultivated. Snow's rule wasn't just about himself, it was about building a structure that would outlast him, and that's exactly what happens. Even though he dies, his influence stretches far beyond his timeline. It's why his victory feels systemic, not personal. He didn't need to live forever. He just needed to plant the cycle so deeply into Panem that breaking it would take more than one revolution. When you put it all together, Snow's story mirrors Thanos's in a dark way. Both villains lose in a direct fight, but both leave behind a philosophy that the heroes can't erase. For Snow, it was the belief that fear and violence are the only way to control people, and when Coin picks up that same weapon, it proves him right. The rebellion didn't destroy his system, it only replaced the person at the top. Now let's turn to a villain who shaped the very foundation of Gotham, and by extension, Batman himself. I'm talking about Ra's al Ghul in Batman Begins. Most people remember Ra's as the villain Bruce Wayne defeats at the end of the movie. The train crashes, the microwave emitter is destroyed, and Gotham survives. On the surface, Batman wins, but when you look closer, you realize something very different. Ra's al Ghul still got what he wanted, not through the destruction of Gotham, but through the transformation of Bruce Wayne. His real victory wasn't in tearing Gotham down, it was in reshaping its protector. From the beginning, Ra's al Ghul wasn't like Joker who wanted chaos, or Bane who wanted domination. Ra's was a believer in balance. He saw civilizations as corrupt machines that, when left unchecked, consumed themselves, and he believed his League of Shadows had a duty to destroy cities that had grown too rotten so the world could reset. Gotham was his next target. To him, it was a place drowning in crime, greed, and corruption. The city wasn't worth saving. It needed to be wiped clean. That's why, when Bruce trains with him, Ra's doesn't just teach him to fight, he teaches him philosophy. He drills into Bruce the idea that fear can be a weapon, that criminals thrive on chaos, that justice sometimes requires ruthlessness. At the climax of Batman Begins, Batman destroys Ra's al Ghul's plan to gas Gotham with fear toxin. He saves the city from collapse, and Ra's dies in the train wreck. Classic hero's victory, but this is what most people miss. Ra's didn't lose. His philosophy lived on inside Bruce. Think about it. Batman becomes Gotham's symbol of fear, the very thing Ra's taught him. The League of Shadows believed fear was the ultimate tool for control, and Bruce takes that exact idea and wears it like a cape. He doesn't reject Raz's teachings, but uses them. So even though Gotham wasn't burned to the ground, Ra's al Ghul's worldview still shaped its protector. The city wasn't destroyed physically, but it was changed forever through Batman's new methods. And here's where it gets even more interesting. The League of Shadows doesn't stop with Ra's death. They come back in The Dark Knight Rises through Bane and Talia al Ghul. Their mission continues. Their philosophy endures. This shows that Ra's al Ghul never needed to personally succeed in that one mission. He built a system, a legacy. It's the same principle we saw with Snow and Thanos. The villain's death doesn't erase their victory when their philosophy outlives them. Meanwhile, Batman himself is Raz's greatest success. Without the League of Shadows, Bruce would never have become the Batman we know. He learned stealth, strategy, and the use of fear directly from Ra's al Ghul. And even though he turned those tools against the League, he was still playing their game. Every time criminals in Gotham cower at the sight of the bat signal, that's Raz's philosophy at work. Every time Bruce hides in the shadows to terrify his enemies, that's Raz's lesson being proven right. It's almost poetic that the man who wanted Gotham destroyed instead built the weapon that would keep Gotham in line, not by wiping it out, but by instilling the League's idols into its savior. Now let's end with one of the wildest examples of all, Homelander from The Boys. At first glance, Homelander should be easy to stop. He's arrogant, reckless, and hated by many people around him. The boys keep exposing his crimes. Vought faces scandals, and time after time, it feels like he's on the edge of losing everything. Yet, Homelander still wins. Most viewers see Homelander as a Superman copy with no morality, but the truth is, his greatest power isn't just his strength, it's his ability to bend perception. From the start, Vought trains him to be the shining face of superheroes. He doesn't just fly and fight crime. He smiles for cameras, makes speeches, and appears in movies. He's less a protector and more a brand, and he learns quickly that if people believe in him, it doesn't matter what he actually does. That's his true victory. No matter how many secrets get exposed, no matter how violent he becomes, Homelander knows he can twist the story. Take a look at the series. Time and time again, Homelander seems cornered. His crimes are recorded. His allies turn on him. His own team starts to see who he really is. By normal storytelling rules, this should lead to his downfall, but every single time, the opposite happens. When his relationship with Stormfront is exposed and she's revealed as a Nazi, Homelander takes the hit, but he doesn't fall. He simply rebrands, shifts the focus, and finds a way to spin the narrative back to himself. When Queen Maeve threatens to expose him with the plane video, hero. He doesn't crush her. He lets her hold the card because deep down, he knows even evidence won't destroy him if the public still wants their hero. And most importantly, when he publicly kills a protester in front of a crowd, the opposite happens. That moment is the clearest sign that Homelander has already won. The scariest part of Homelander's victory is that he doesn't win alone. He wins because the system around him allows it. Thought depends on his image to sell superheroes as products. Politicians want his support. The media needs his face on screens. Even when his crimes leak, too many people have something to gain by keeping him in power. So while the boys try to fight him with truth and evidence, the system itself works against them. Every institution bends to protect Homelander because he's too valuable to take down. That's a structural victory, but Homelander's deepest win is the people. By season 3, you see it clearly. Homelander doesn't need everyone to love him. He only needs enough people to worship him loudly, to defend him no matter what he does, and he gets exactly that. He creates a loyal fan base that cheers even when he crosses the line. That's why his smile at the end of the protest scene is so terrifying. He realizes he can finally stop pretending. He can be his real self, openly violent, and people will still clap for him. When you put all of this together, you see the same pattern we saw with Thanos, Snow, and Ra's al Ghul. Villains don't always need to be alive at the end of the story to win. Sometimes they win because their philosophy, their system, or their influence outlasts any fight against them. For Homelander, his victory is that no matter how much truth comes out, the system bends around him, and the people still choose him. The boys can expose him, they can resist him, but they can't erase him because he has become bigger than just a person. He's an idea and a weapon the crowd willingly cheers for, and that's the most dangerous kind of win.